I think I'll address the first one first, which I believe is, are you asking whether, well, I didn't suggest that journalists are not, right? I'm not suggesting that journalists are not, in fact, what I say consistently in all my writings is that there is an ethical crisis, which is different from saying you are not following journalism ethics, right? It's not a personal thing, right? It's not like, oh, you said and that's not what is relevant here. I am saying that there is an ethical crisis in the journalistic profession. Okay, and I actually would connect that ethical crisis to exactly your point, the second point, which is that we are seeing too much state intervention, okay, too much state suppression. Okay? I mean, that's exactly what Arab Spring was about, right? I mean, Arab Spring was about, I don't know if it was Facebook revolution, as some people are saying, but Arab Spring was all about resistance to that kind of constant state suppression, not only of media, perhaps every aspect of our lives, right? Media is one aspect of, kind of, let's not make ourselves more important than we are, right? I mean, we play a critical role, but we don't always define society, right? So in that sense, I think that your second point actually is the point that I'm trying to make, is that the ethical crisis of the profession is because of many factors. One, not only journalists are put in these positions that they cannot always be ethical, but also they're under pressures, as are their proprietors, from state intervention, from government control. Okay? Now, again, we can sort of sit here and say, well, we're screwed. Okay, what do we do? Right? I think the only thing I can say to that is there are ways of mobilizing. I think one example that I think is very, very interesting for us to follow is what Chinese journalists have done in the last, I would say, 15 years. Okay? Talk about state suppression. Okay, and maybe Pradeep can talk about this better than I can, right? Talk about the highest degree of state suppression. Okay, so I won't be able to have this conversation in China, right? There is no discussion of journalism ethics in China, right? There's just, in that sense, you can sort of say, so we always think, we are in the worst situation. No. You talk to some of the Chinese journalists, in fact, you cannot even talk to some of the Chinese journalists, but they won't talk to you because they're so afraid. Right? Many of them work for state. What they have done is very interesting. Many of them work for sort of state newspapers and state organizations, media organizations in the morning, and they blog under fictitious names in the evening. Okay? And many of the top, even recently there was a news article that just came out that one of the bloggers, right, broke was the large-scale contamination, I believe, of one of the mining areas where the state is trying to build this mine there, and that is creating huge amount of contamination in the area. So it's a real environmental journalism going on there in the name of blogging. Right? Of course, even then, the state is constantly looking for them. So what they do, one of them told me, right, when I was there, is they have to constantly change their blogging names, like sometimes on a daily basis, right? So in that sense, I think, of course, state suppression is there. I'm not saying that, things are great, I don't know what your problem is. No, of course not. But again, you're not alone, right? You're not alone. This has happened everywhere, right? Not everywhere, but in many countries. But I think that's why also, particularly in India, I really see that happening, has helped the Indian press enormously, is also the parallel growth of the civil society movements. What Nandini talked about during the two-day conference is the right to information movement. Right, and I'm not as familiar with what's going on in Sri Lanka. So there has to be parallel movements which work with the media in order to resist the suppression, constant interference by the government. To me, that is, I cannot accept that. But what is more problematic for me is media professionals saying that I am willing to let the government make ethical principles or write ethical principles or impose certain kind of regulations on me. Okay? I think that needs to be resisted. Okay, easy for me to say here because I'm flying out tomorrow morning. But, right? Or easy for me to give that prescription. Okay, but you know, I mean, that's what journalists do, right? You are brave people. You are in this profession because you are the writer of the knowledge state, right? You write, you produce information. You are the vanguards of society. You know, that's what my colleague who works in the broadcast journalism says. You know, I can't explain to my friends that I am a public figure. Right? I mean, she's on the news. She's a journalist, just like you guys, right? She went through her college. She worked in a television station, right? She always sees herself in a position, right? And I say that to every journalism student. You know, okay. One of them came to me. This is sort of a little side story. One of them came to me about 4 weeks ago and said, "I want to be a broadcast journalist." I was like, "Why?" "I want to see myself on TV." Wrong. Go away. Okay? No, if you want to see yourself on TV, you can just do a videotape and put yourself on YouTube. You don't need a journalism degree for that. Right? So that's not why you're a journalist. You're not. I would like to think you're not a journalist because you want to see yourself on TV or you want to see your little byline in the Newsfirst. So, you know, I'm pretty good. Right? You do believe in certain principles. You do believe there is something in you that attracted you to that profession, right? And that passion cannot be lost, right? And that passion should ultimately, I know it's kind of, you know, it's a very, you know, kind of a future, you say about a future, you know, idealistic situation. My God, every profession needs to have ideals. And if you don't have ideals, and you know, kind of, it's a long-winded response to your question, but I would your comment, but I would say that you know, but do not comply with the suppression. That would be my and resist, and you know, there are different ways of resisting an oppressive state. So anyway, I'll stop here and see if other people.